Welcome back to the daily Kitzur Shulchan Aruch Living Jewish class. We are going through all the laws of brachas, of blessings. There's 14 sections on that. And we are now in section 52, continuing with section 52, which deal with the bracha of Borei Priha 8, made on fruit, Borei Priha Adama, made on vegetables, and Shakal Diyamid Varai, made on other foods. To summarize what we discussed yesterday, we spoke firstly about how one defines a fruit or vegetable. It's dependent on whether the branch from which the vegetable or the fruit, I should say, defining a fruit, it's dependent on whether the branch from which the fruit grows lasts from year to year. And we said that banana trees actually are debatably ha'adama, because a lot of the tree withers away in the winter and reproduces itself. And so some say that we're actually not sure if it's considered a banana, is considered a fruit or vegetable. And since we're not sure between the two, we say a bracha borei priha adama.
But I think that a banana tree, you also have to chop it down almost all the way in order to harvest it, and also it doesn't have a proper bark. It's mostly water and like a leafy kind of. It's not a proper bark. It's like a cane almost.
Correct. It's interesting, but nonetheless, it does say in the Shulchan Aruch that if a person said Borei Priha 8 on a banana, then they do not need to make another bracha. I'm not sure where it says that. I think it says it in the Shulchan Aruch, meaning that there still is an argument to say it is considered a tree. So it's debatable. It's an interesting one. Then mushrooms or the rest, anything else you make a bracha of, shakal diyamid varai, a tea, a coffee, a chocolate, whatever it might be. Mushrooms are also shakal diyamid varai. They're actually not considered a vegetable because they don't grow out of the ground. They just find themselves where they grow, wherever they grow. They grow using of the moisture. Then we got into a big discussion in halacha 4 and 5 and 6. 4, 5, and 6. We spoke about fruits that are usually eaten cooked or usually eaten raw, and the general principle is that if this particular fruit or vegetable by most of the world is eaten raw and is not eaten cooked, then if you eat it cooked, then the bracha is downgraded, and you'd have to say shahakol. And the reverse, if it's usually most people do not eat it cooked, they only eat it raw. Then if you eat it cooked, then again the bracha would be downgraded. That's a summary of what we discussed yesterday. Today we discuss a couple of less common fruits and vegetables, more rare fruits and vegetables, and what the brachos would be. Let's go through this and take a look. So inferior kinds of fruit that grow on brambles and thorn bushes or on other trees which grow wild and are not planted, such as wild apples and the like, which when raw are not fit to eat, then even if they are cooked or fried in honey and sugar and made edible, you would still say the bracha shahakol. So if it's wild and it's quite inedible, even if you're able to make it edible, it's not considered, it's not something that's usually eaten as a fruit or vegetable, and therefore it doesn't have the special bracha for fruits and vegetables. But hazelnuts, although they grow wild in the forest, are considered superior articles of food, and you would say the regular bracha of Borei Priha 8 on hazelnuts. More on these different types of fruits and vegetables.
Why is that, Rabbi?
What?
With the hazelnut, why is it considered a superior food?
I think it's because it's eaten that way. It's by default not viewed as something that's not eaten, but it's something that is eaten. I didn't do research on these halachas, so I can't give you different answers, but I think that's the reason. I'll see if I can get back to you on that one.
No.
Herbs or herbs which grow wild without cultivation are fit to eat raw, if they're cooked and made into a special dish, still, since they were not cultivated by man, they are not considered a fruit of the ground, then you would actually say shahakal over them.
That doesn't count for celery, right?
No. Celery, if you eat raw celery, it goes back to our discussion yesterday about cabbage. Again, the question is,
No, but celery is like parsley and oregano. What's it called? The other one, coriander leaves. So if you eat them, you should say shakol.
So, let's continue a little bit and see a little more. But lettuce and similar vegetables that are planted, they're not growing wild, but they're being planted, require the bracha b'eri pri adama. So the moment something is being planted, the moment it's being farmed, then it's being planted for the purpose of consumption, and then the bracha would be ha'adama if you're eating it in the way that it's usually eaten. So we were talking before specifically about wild fruits and vegetables, which are considered like inferior. And we said an exception to that would be hazelnuts that are not considered inferior, even when they grow wild. But anything that's farmed will always have the bracha, because if it's being farmed, it means that this fruit or vegetable is being planted to be eaten. It's not just wild. It's not like it's not just like part of the forest. It's an actual fruit or vegetable. So the same thing I think would go with celery. Furthermore, regarding herbs that grow wild, if they produce superior fruit, such as blackberries and raspberries, the bracha said over there would be b'eri pri adama. So as long as it's farmed, it will always have the bracha b'eri pri adama. If it grows wild, it depends if it's considered superior or not. And I'll have to get back to you, John, on what the measuring stick is as far as what's considered superior and inferior. Okay. So now we're going to talk about, you have a fruit tree, and on the tree there's other stuff that's growing too. Now you might say that sounds ridiculous, but if you know African Street, if you drive on African Street, you'll see palm trees. And on those palm trees, at certain times of year, you'll see, I think they're orange, bright orange berries that fall on the floor. Now, if you are familiar, if you know a little bit, you'll know that palm trees are actually called date trees. Dates grow on palm trees. So if you're making a mathematical equation, you might conclude that obviously these orange things are dates. But if you look at them, they're not. So a date tree or a palm tree, its primary fruit is dates. But on the very same tree also grow berries. I don't know if they are or aren't edible. And also coconuts. Coconuts also grow on palm trees. So you actually have certain trees that produce a number of different fruits. So if you have a primary fruit and a secondary fruit of the tree, meaning there's the main fruit which the tree is planted for, and then there are other trees that kind of just are fringe benefits, then such fruit would actually be downgraded from a 8 to Adama. Let's see that inside. That which is not the main part of the fruit is not considered as the fruit itself, but is one level lower. If it is the fruit of a tree, then instead of saying the regular bracha on fruits of the tree, b'eri pri ha'etz, it gets downgraded to b'eri pri ha'adama. And if it's a fruit of the ground, instead of saying the regular bracha of b'eri pri ha'adama, you downgrade it to the bracha of shahakal. Therefore, a caper tree whose leaves are edible, and where its leaves are joined with the stem, there are small edible buds, like the growths at the juncture of willow leaves, and caper berries. And the caper berries, form the main part of the fruit, while the caper flowers only appeal around the fruits, like the shell of a nut, but are also edible. So we have over here on this particular tree, a caper tree. You have the caper berries, and then you have flowers which are peel around the berry, but they're also edible. So you have the berry and you have the leaves of flowers around the berry that are also edible. So the berries, which are the main part of the tree, you would say the main bracha, which is Bar Pri Ha'etz, the bracha that you make on fruits of the tree. Over the leaves and the little buds and the flowers, you would downgrade to Bar Pri Adama. Likewise, if somebody preserves, somebody who makes jam out of roses, he takes rose leaves and he mixes it with honey and sugar and turns it into a jam. So the bracha would be Bar Pri Adama. Although they grow on trees, interesting, because the roses in my garden definitely grow on bushes. They wouldn't be considered a tree. So I guess roses can either grow on trees or they can grow, or maybe the variety that it speaks about here is a little different from rose bushes. They would still be downgraded. Similarly, over preserves made of orange peel, honey and sugar, you say the bracha Bar Pri Adama. So although it's coming from an orange, which is ha'etz, since the orange peel is secondary to the orange, on the orange inside the peel, you would say Bar Pri Ha'etz, but on the orange peel, you would say Bar Pri Adama. Of a cucumber peel that was fried with honey and sugar, we're getting some interesting ideas over here. Again, the cucumber is naturally ha'adama, it's a fruit of the ground, it's a vegetable. And then the peel of the cucumber gets downgraded from ha'adama to shahakol. So that's an interesting one. If you're nibbling on cucumber peels, then that actually is not considered the main part of the vegetable, and the bracha would be downgraded. Over the pods of peas that are cultivated in the fields, even though they taste sweet, yet if you ate them without the peas, you would say shahakol. But those which have been grown in gardens for the purpose of eating them raw in their pods, even if you only eat the pods, you would say adama. So if you're talking about peas, depends how they grow. The ones that they sell in packets where you actually eat the pod as well, so then that would all be adama. But if it's harvested in a way that usually you just eat the peas and you throw out the pods, then those pods are one level down in bracha, and the bracha would be shahakol. Seeds of fruit that are sweet, you would say Bar Pri Adama. Although it grows on a tree, it's already secondary to the fruit, so it gets downgraded. But bitter tasting seeds are worth nothing at all. And if you eat them, you don't say bracha. So if you're going to eat like the seed of a lemon, the pit or the pip of a lemon, you wouldn't make a bracha at all. But if you make them pleasant tasting by roasting them or in any other way, then you would say a bracha. So you say no bracha at all, not that you say shahakol. If it's inedible and you eat it, then there's no bracha at all. But if it becomes edible by adding some sugar or whatever else or roasting them, then you would still only say shahakol. So the orange is Bar Pri Ha'etz, that's the fruit. The orange peel is downgraded one level to Bar Pri Adama. It's just considered a fruit of the ground, not of the tree. It's not the primary fruit of the orange tree. And the pits, the seeds within that orange, which are extremely bitter, if they're roasted, the bracha would be shahakol, and if they're not, then there's no bracha at all. They're not considered food. Almonds, I mentioned this yesterday. Small almonds are bitter, and the principal food for which they are planted is the shell, which is not bitter. So actually, there's two types of almonds. There's small almonds where the main part of the almond is the shell. And you would make a bracha ha'etz on the shell and not on the almond. But when they are large, the main part is the actual almond, the kernel that's on the inside of the shell. If these taste bitter and you eat them raw, then you don't say any bracha. That's inedible. But if you make them pleasant tasting by roasting them or in any other way, so this is a unique type of almond that grows very bitter and is considered inedible. But once you roast them or you sweeten them, since they've been planted for that purpose, then you would say Bare Pri Ha'etz. Over sugar-coated almonds, even if there's more sugar than almonds, you would still say Ha'etz because that's the main part. But over sugar-coated calamus and aromatic root, you would say Shahakal since the calamus is not a fruit. But I would say that even if you take, for example, chocolate-plated orange peel, there is a certain point where it's no longer chocolate-flavored orange peel. Instead, it becomes orange peel-flavored chocolate. And at that point, once it's no longer chocolate-flavored orange peel or chocolate-covered orange peel, but it's rather orange peel-flavored chocolate, then the bracha would change from Adama to Shahakal. So you got to really ask yourself, what's the primary and what's secondary? Fruits that are still unripe, they're still raw, but were put into honey or sugar, you say Shahakal over them. But over an esrog, a citron that was fried in honey or sugar, you would say Ha'etz. Not sure why that is. I guess because it's usually eaten in such a way. It's usually made into a preserve, into a jam. Spoiled fruit, such as fruit that has become parched by the heat and has fallen off the tree before becoming ripe. Again, it's still considered edible, but it's not. It's very secondary. You would say just Shahakal. Likewise, moldy bread or slightly spoiled food, you would only say Shahakal. But if they are completely spoiled to the point that they are inedible, then you would not make a bracha at all, and you certainly should not be eating such food. Similarly, over strong vinegar, which bubbles when it is poured on the ground, no bracha is said. It's not considered food. But if you mix it with water and it becomes fit to drink, then you would say Shahakal. I see we've already hit 521, but since these are a lot of unusual halachas, if you need to go, please do. Otherwise, it's the end of the week. I'd love to finish off the section because I'd like to start with something new next week. There are types of fruit, I'll do it quickly. There are types of fruit which never ripen on the tree, but after they are picked from the tree, they are stored and covered with straw and chaff and the like, and in that way they become ripe. Since that is their natural way of ripening, so you would say the bracha ha'etz over them. There are certain kinds of fruit that contain only juice that is concentrated in their seeds. In Yiddish, they are called colonus. These seeds are not fit to eat, and after the juice is extracted from them, they are thrown away. Over this extraction, you would say shahakal. Since its main component is the juice that is extracted from it, it's not considered the fruit. Even if you eat the skin and the seeds as well, you would only say shahakal because it's not considered a fruit. It's considered a producer of some juice. We say neither the bracha eitz nor hadama unless we can at least slightly recognize the fruit. This is a new discussion, but if they are so crushed that they are unrecognizable, for example, prune paste, lekfer in Yiddish, which is made of cooked prunes or mashed peas, then we would say shahakal. Or another example would be applesauce that's been completely bullied. But if after the fact you said the bracha that was appropriate for that kind, you would not have to correct yourself. That bracha will work as well. However, if the accepted way of eating these fruits is in a crushed form by completely mashing them, then you would still say the bracha that's meant for them. So there's a discussion about applesauce, whether the bracha would be eitz or shahakal. Rice and millet that have been cooked, if they haven't been mashed, you would say hadama. If they were mashed, then there's a difference between rice and millet. Technically, according to the law, rice you would say mazonos, and over millet you'd say shahakal. But nowadays we're not certain whether which one's which. In Hebrew, we're not sure which one is oros and which one is doichen, which one is rice and which one's millet. Therefore, a God-fearing person should eat mashed millet or rice only as part of a meal. However, if in an emergency you have no bread, then you would say the bracha shahakal. And the after bracha would be barda fasha. So the bracha on rice is shahakal. I must say that Some Brocha finds it, for example, says he has a tradition of which one's which, and he actually says the same as on cooked rice as well. Over bread made of cornmeal, even in places where such bread is a staple food, it's still shahakal, it's considered corn. And finally, over sugar, you say shahakal. Likewise, if you chew on sugar cane, you say shahakal. Also over cinnamon and licorice that you chew and enjoy the flavor, and you discard the substance, you say the bracha shahakal. So although sugar canes grow on the ground, you're not actually eating the cane, you're just sucking on it and you're extracting the juice from within it. So the bracha is shahakal. Thank you so much for joining and wishing you a wonderful